Thanks for the upgrade, my dear, Ethan grinned as he sauntered into the living room, exuding an almost unbearable level of confidence. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed his sunglasses onto the coffee table, then stood there, shoulders squared, chest puffed out, relishing the moment. His tailored suit hugged his frame perfectly, his pristine new designer shoes gleamed under the soft lighting, and his luggage, adorned with high-end brand logos, spoke volumes about his newfound luxury. First-class flights to Europe, lavish stays at five-star hotels. He spread his arms as if embracing an invisible audience. This is the life I've been missing, Bella. I couldn't help myself. I burst out laughing. Ethan's grin faltered, his eyebrows knitted together in irritation. What's so funny? He snapped, his voice sharp with offense. Oh, Ethan, I sighed, shaking my head. You have no idea what you've done. My name is Bella, and I'm 34 years old. I work in cybersecurity, a field that requires vigilance, precision, and an acute awareness of deception. For the past 7 years, I've been married to a man who turned out to be a walking red flag, wrapped neatly in charm and smooth talk. Ethan was always the dreamer, the schemer, the man with grand ideas that never quite materialized. Meanwhile, I was the one making things happen, holding down a stable career while he bounced from one half-baked venture to the next. I ignored the warning signs, the financial secrecy, the constant excuses, the way money always seemed to vanish into thin air. I convinced myself we were a team. That was my mistake. Then, at 2 a.m. last week, Ethan made a mistake he couldn't talk his way out of. I had been fast asleep upstairs when it happened. He must have waited, listening for my breathing to settle into deep, steady rhythms before creeping down to my office. What he didn't realize was that my work had trained me to anticipate scams and deceit, but I had never imagined I'd need those skills in my own home. That night, Ethan used my laptop to access one of my credit cards. He copied down the details, snapped a few pictures with his phone, and slunk back into bed, his crime neatly tucked away under the blanket of darkness. The next morning, still groggy with sleep, I sat at the kitchen counter sipping my coffee when my phone vibrated with a flood of notifications. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach as I opened my banking app. Nearly $50,000 in charges had appeared overnight. Designer clothing, expensive watches, first-class flights to Paris. Of course he was. But instead of panic, a slow, satisfied smile spread across my lips. Ethan had unknowingly made the biggest blunder of his life. The credit card he had stolen wasn't one of my personal accounts. It was a dummy card linked to a cybersecurity training program I'd designed at work. A program meant to teach companies how to detect and respond to fraud. Every transaction triggered an automatic alert that was immediately flagged and sent straight to the authorities. Ethan had just walked straight into a digital trap of his own making. Without wasting a second, I called my lawyer, Chloe. "You are not going to believe this," I told her, recounting every absurd detail. There was silence for half a second before she burst into laughter. Wait, let me get this straight," she gasped between chuckles. "He stole a dummy card? The one that's literally designed to flag fraud." "Exactly," I said, my voice calm but laced with satisfaction. "Oh wow," she mused. "And he thinks he's being clever?" "Clever?" I snorted. "Every single charge he makes is being monitored in real time." She whistled. "Have the authorities contacted you yet?" "Not yet," I admitted, glancing at the ever-growing list of fraudulent transactions, "but it's only a matter of time." For the rest of the week, I kept my silence, watching, waiting. Ethan left a note on the counter 2 days later, scribbled hastily on a torn piece of paper. "Taking some time for myself. Don't wait up." I knew exactly what that meant. He was using my stolen money to live it up abroad, basking in what he believed was his triumphant escape. Each night, more alerts rolled in. Extravagant dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, nights at five-star hotels, shopping sprees that would make a celebrity blush. Every notification felt like a small victory. He had no clue he was painting a perfect digital trail straight to his downfall. 3 days into his reckless spending spree, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed a number I didn't recognize. "Bella Foster?" a firm voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "This is Agent Keller, federal investigator assigned to your case. We've identified significant fraudulent activity tied to your account. Do you have any idea who might be responsible?" I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said simply. My husband. A pause, then a low whistle. Your husband. I explained everything, the cybersecurity program, the dummy card, and Ethan's utter lack of awareness. When I finished, Agent Keller let out a slow, amused exhale. Well, he said, that's a new one. I could practically hear his smirk over the phone. You'll need to provide a formal statement, he continued, but I think it's safe to say your husband just turned himself into a textbook case study. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. Ethan had always believed he was the smartest man in the room. Too bad for him, he had just proven otherwise, in spectacular fashion. And now it was only a matter of time before he realized it too. Based on what we've already flagged, he's in serious trouble. By the time Ethan waltzed back through the door, his ego bloated from a week of indulgence. I was more than ready. He strolled into the living room like nothing had happened, carrying himself with the unshakable arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. Draped in designer labels, wearing the spoils of his stolen spree, he smirked as he dropped his expensive duffel bag onto the floor with a smug thud. Thanks for the upgrade, he said, flashing a cocky grin. You really outdid yourself this time. I couldn't help it. The laughter bubbled out of me before I could stop it. Ethan's smirk faltered, his brow creasing as he studied my expression. Clearly, he had been expecting outrage, fury, maybe even tears, but laughter? That threw him off. What's so funny? He asked, his voice suddenly sharp, defensive. Ooh, Ethan, I sighed, shaking my head. You're about to find out. He rolled his eyes, kicking off his designer shoes. Seriously though, Bella, he continued, shrugging off his tailored jacket and tossing it over the back of the couch. You should have told me about that card ages ago. Imagine how much fun we could have had. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, my expression unreadable. And how exactly did you think this was going to end? He smirked again, that insufferable, clueless smirk. You're always so uptight about money, it's not like you couldn't afford it, he scoffed. I figured you'd get over it once you saw how happy it made me. The sheer audacity of his words might have enraged me at one point. But now it was almost pathetic. I bit back another laugh, knowing that every second he spent bragging was another nail in his coffin. So, the watches, the flights, the hotels, you thought all of that was just a gift from me? I asked, tilting my head. Not thought, he said, pointing a thumb at himself. Knew. It's about time you loosened up, Bella. I smiled, a tight-lipped expression that gave nothing away. I'll bet. The moment Ethan disappeared into the shower, humming some obnoxious tune, I picked up my phone and texted Chloe. He's back, ready to move forward. Her reply came almost instantly. Perfect. I'll alert Agent Keller. For the past week, Chloe and Agent Keller had been meticulously piecing together the case against Ethan. Every transaction, every fraudulent charge, every trace of his reckless spending had been logged in excruciating detail. The designer boutiques, the luxury hotels in Paris, Ethan had painted the perfect portrait of someone who truly believed he was above consequence. But he had no idea just how deep he had dug his own grave. Agent Keller had assured me that the fraud alerts from the dummy account had already set a full investigation in motion. We'll bring him in for questioning once you're ready, he had told me during our last call. But I'd recommend letting him walk into it on his own. The more confident he is, the better. Now, as I listened to Ethan's off-key singing echoing from the bathroom, I felt an eerie sense of calm wash over me. For years, I had let him take advantage of my trust, my kindness, my stability. But this time, he was about to face the consequences of underestimating me. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a plush towel and grinning like a man who had never faced a single hardship in his life, he flopped onto the couch without a care in the world. You should have seen Paris, he said, reaching into his duffel bag and pulling out a gleaming gold watch. He held it up to the light, admiring it like a child with a new toy. The shops, the restaurants, it was like a dream. I leaned against the doorway, arms still crossed. Sounds incredible, I said smoothly. Tell me more. And oh, did he ever. He launched into a detailed, boastful recounting of his week-long spree, complete with exaggerated hand gestures and a ridiculous amount of detail about the champagne quality at some exclusive rooftop bar. Every word he spoke felt like a confession, an indictment that he didn't even realize he was making. And the best part? My phone, sitting innocuously on the table, was recording every last syllable. Finally, with a satisfied sigh, he leaned back and grinned. "And the best part," he said, holding up the watch again? "Nobody suspected a thing, not even you." The next morning, over coffee, Chloe and I finalized the timeline. "He's got no defense," she said, scrolling through the mountain of evidence we had compiled. "The fraud alerts, the charges, his conversation from last night, it's airtight. Agent Keller is ready to bring him in for questioning. They're coordinating with the local police to execute the arrest." I nodded, exhaling slowly as the weight of everything finally started to settle in. "What happens after that?" I asked. Chloe set her phone down. "He'll face multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of a financial account. Given the amount of money involved, this won't be a slap on the wrist. Best case scenario for him? He cuts a deal and avoids serious jail time. Worst case? He's looking at years behind bars." A part of me wanted to feel sorry for him, but then I remembered the smug grin on his face, the way he flaunted his stolen wealth without a second thought about the damage he had caused. This wasn't just a mistake. This was who Ethan had always been, and now? Now he was finally about to pay for it. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern, an unrelenting cycle of selfishness and entitlement that I had been blind to for far too long. Later that evening, as Ethan lounged lazily on the couch, scrolling through his phone without a care in the world, I heard the unmistakable sound of a knock at the door. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation. The moment had finally arrived. With steady hands, I walked to the door and pulled it open, revealing Agent Keller flanked by 2 uniformed officers. They stood tall and composed on my porch, their presence exuding authority and finality. "Good evening, Miss Miller," Keller greeted me, his tone professional yet warm. "Is Ethan home?" "He's right inside," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "Feel free to make yourselves comfortable." Ethan looked up from his phone, his brows furrowing in confusion as he registered the presence of 3 unexpected guests. Sitting up straighter, he cast a wary glance at me before shifting his attention to Keller. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with unease. Agent Keller took a step forward, his expression unreadable but firm. "Ethan Miller, you're under investigation for multiple counts of credit card fraud and unauthorized use of financial accounts," he stated calmly. "We'd like you to come with us for questioning." The color drained from Ethan's face. The air of smug confidence that had surrounded him for years vanished in an instant. "What? No! This has to be a mistake," he stammered, eyes darting between me and the officers, desperation creeping into his voice. "Bella, tell them, this is crazy!" I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly as I regarded him with a cool detachment. "I don't know, Ethan," I mused. "You've been awfully busy lately. Maybe you should explain it to them." As the officers read him his rights and moved to take him into custody, Ethan's panic escalated. "You can't do this, Bella. This is a setup. You're my wife. Aren't you supposed to stand by me?" A slow, humorless smile spread across my lips. "Funny," I said, leaning against the doorway. "I thought husbands weren't supposed to steal from their wives. Guess we're both learning something new today." Ethan's desperation morphed into anger as he shot me a venomous glare. "You won't get away with this," he seethed. I merely smiled, tilting my head ever so slightly. "Oh, Ethan," I murmured, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "I already have." The door shut behind them with a sharp, decisive click. The house, once filled with Ethan's arrogance, his lies, his illusions, was suddenly silent. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where he had stood just minutes ago, my heart racing, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just transpired. He was gone. Finally, undeniably. But this wasn't over. Not yet. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Chloe. "He's with Keller now," she informed me, her voice steady but firm. "They've started questioning him." I exhaled, unsurprised. "Let me guess," I said, already knowing the answer. "He's playing the victim." "Spot on," Chloe replied with a dry laugh. "He's claiming you gave him permission to use the card." But don't worry, between the fraud alerts, the transaction records, and your recording, he doesn't stand a chance. The next morning, Agent Keller called with an update. "We've got everything we need," he confirmed. "Your husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, admitted to using the card but insists he didn't know it was tied to a fraud detection program. He's trying to blame the mix-up on you." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "That sounds about right," I muttered. "What happens next?" "We're moving forward with the charges," Keller explained. "He's facing multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized use of a financial account. Given the amount of money involved, he's looking at significant consequences. The buyer protection programs flagged his luxury purchases, so those are being reimbursed. You're not liable for a cent." Relief flooded through me, so powerful it nearly left me lightheaded. For days, I had carried the weight of Ethan's actions, worried that somehow he would slip through the cracks. But now, hearing the certainty in Keller's voice, I realized the full extent of my victory. "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than I ever had before, for everything. "Don't thank me," Keller replied, his voice tinged with amusement. "This case practically handed itself to us. You handled this brilliantly." The fallout hit Ethan harder than I had expected. Word spread quickly among our mutual friends and acquaintances about his arrest, and it wasn't long before his carefully crafted image of the charming, carefree husband began to crumble. Nicole, the woman I had long suspected he'd been seeing, apparently dropped him the moment she heard about the charges. The designer goods he had so proudly flaunted were confiscated. The first-class flights he had booked, canceled. The banks froze his accounts. The life he had built on lies was unraveling, thread by thread. One evening, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. And sure enough, it was Ethan. "Bella," he began, his voice low and drained of its usual arrogance. I need to talk to you." "I couldn't help it," I laughed. A full, unrestrained, incredulous laugh. "Oh, Ethan," I said, shaking my head. "The only thing you need to do is figure out how to survive the mess you made. You can explain yourself to the judge." His voice shifted, desperation creeping into his tone. "Please, I messed up, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just..." "Just what?" I cut in, my voice ice cold. "Just trying to steal $50,000 from me, just hoping I wouldn't notice? Just banking on me being too blind or too forgiving to stop you?" A long silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, he muttered, "I thought you loved me." I let out a sharp breath, my anger finally boiling over. "I did, Ethan. I loved the person I thought you were. But the person who stole from me, who lied to me, who thought he could get away with it, that's not someone I could ever love." Before he could respond, I ended the call. A week later, Chloe rang with an update. "Ethan took the plea deal," she confirmed. "He's avoiding jail time, but he has to pay back every cent he tried to steal, plus complete community service, and his credit is going to be in ruins for years." "That sounds fitting," I said, leaning back in my chair. "He always wanted the high life. Now he gets to see how the other half lives." Chloe chuckled. "You're handling this way better than most people would." I smiled to myself, swirling the wine in my glass. For years, I thought Ethan was the one holding our marriage together, that his charm, his ambition, his big ideas were what kept us moving forward. But now I see it clearly. I was the one holding everything up. He was just dead weight. The day the divorce papers arrived, I poured myself another glass of wine and sat on the couch, letting my eyes wander over the apartment that now felt wholly and completely mine. Ethan's absence wasn't a loss. It was a gift, a second chance, a clean slate, the opportunity to rebuild my life without the constant shadow of his selfishness looming over me. As I sipped, I thought back to that moment. Ethan strutting through the door, flaunting his stolen wealth, so confident, so sure of his own brilliance. And now he was the one paying the price. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a life I could finally call my own. In the days following Ethan's arrest, the apartment felt eerily quiet. His things were gone, what little he hadn't sold or crammed into his designer duffel bag, but the space felt lighter, almost as if his betrayal had been physically lifted from the walls. I could sit in my own home without feeling his presence suffocating me. One afternoon, Chloe stopped by to drop off some final paperwork. She settled onto the couch, her usual no-nonsense demeanor softened just slightly. "How are you holding up?" she asked, eyeing me carefully. "Better than I thought I would," I admitted, handing her a cup of coffee. "It's strange, but I don't even feel angry anymore, just relieved." A knowing smile played at her lips. "That's because you've already won. You didn't just survive this, Bella. You came out stronger." I let her words sink in as we sifted through the last of the documents, finalizing the details of Ethan's financial restitution. It wasn't just about the money, though watching him be forced to pay it all back was deeply satisfying. This was about something bigger, about finally reclaiming my independence. For years, I had let Ethan dictate the terms of our relationship, telling myself it was easier to keep the peace. But now I saw the truth. Peace built on silence and compromise wasn't peace at all. A week later, the official letter of divorce arrived, delivered in an unremarkable envelope that felt far too small to contain something so monumental. I held it in my hands, letting the weight of it settle over me before carefully tearing it open. My eyes scanned the lines of legal jargon until they landed on the words that mattered most: finalized and irrevocable. I sat down at the kitchen table, letter in hand, and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I said, "I do." But maybe, just maybe, it was the life I was always meant to have. When I married Ethan, I had envisioned stability, partnership, and a future built on mutual trust. But now, as I looked around the home I had rebuilt for myself, I realized I had gained something far greater: freedom, clarity, and the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. That evening, Lauren came over with a bottle of wine and a carton of my favorite takeout. She raised her glass with a playful smirk. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes twinkling, "and to the absolute dumpster fire you just walked away from." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. "To never settling for less than I deserve." Over the next few weeks, I slowly pieced together what my new life would look like. I redecorated the apartment, adding splashes of color and personal touches that reflected me, not us, not him, just me. I finally took the solo vacation I had dreamed about for years, traveling along the coast, feeling the ocean breeze on my face, and soaking in the kind of peace that only comes from leaving everything behind for a while. Ethan tried to reach out a few more times, through mutual acquaintances, with vague apologies over email, even a laughably tone-deaf letter claiming he had changed. But I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. Every now and then, I'd hear updates about his life through the grapevine. He was struggling to find work, his reputation tarnished by the fraud charges. He had moved back in with his parents, still clinging to the belief that he could somehow talk his way out of the mess he had created. I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, I felt relief, because he was no longer my problem. A month after everything was finalized, I stood by the window of my apartment, sipping my morning coffee and watching the city come to life below. The sunlight poured into the living room, highlighting the fresh coat of paint I had chosen, my favorite shade of blue. The space no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like home. It was peaceful, mine, and filled with endless possibilities. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. For years, I had clung to the promise of marriage, to the idea that building a life with someone meant sacrifice, compromise, and unwavering loyalty. I had ignored the little voice inside me that whispered something was off, that warned me his charm was nothing more than a well-polished mask for his selfishness. But now I understood something important. Walking away wasn't failure. It was strength. That weekend, Lauren and I met for brunch, a new ritual we had started since Ethan's exit. Over mimosas and waffles, she leaned forward with a grin. "So, what's next for you?" I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and calm that had eluded me for so long. "Honestly, I'm just focusing on myself for now. Work's going great, and I've been thinking about taking a longer vacation. Maybe somewhere quiet near the mountains." She raised her glass. "That's what I like to hear. You deserve it." For the first time in years, I felt like I was making decisions purely for me. No compromises, no second guessing, just the freedom to live on my own terms. Occasionally, I still heard updates about Ethan from mutual acquaintances. He was struggling to rebuild his life, bouncing from one low-paying job to the next, trying to pay back the money he owed. The designer suits and luxury vacations were long gone, replaced by a reality he was woefully unprepared for. But I didn't dwell on it. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. The last time I heard from him was through an email, a long, rambling apology that reeked more of self-pity than sincerity. I read the first few lines before deleting it without a second thought. I didn't need closure from him. I had already found it within myself. One evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, reflecting on everything I had endured. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the relentless fight to reclaim what was mine. It had all led to this moment. And while the road had been painful, it had also been necessary. I no longer felt angry. I no longer felt bitter. If anything, I felt grateful. Ethan's betrayal had forced me to confront my own strength, to stop compromising and start prioritizing myself. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value my independence, and to never again let someone else take control of my life. As the city lights flickered in the distance, I raised my glass to the night sky. "Here's to me," I whispered. "Here's to starting over." And with that, I closed the chapter on Ethan for good, ready to embrace whatever came next. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that strength isn't measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by when you choose to walk away. For years, I convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, that loyalty meant overlooking red flags, and that keeping the peace was worth losing pieces of myself. I was wrong. Real love, real partnership, isn't about compromise at the expense of your own happiness. It's about mutual respect, trust, and a willingness to build something together. Not one person doing all the heavy lifting while the other reaps the rewards. Ethan taught me an important lesson, though not in the way he intended. He taught me to listen to my instincts, to value my own worth, and to never again ignore that nagging feeling that something isn't right. He showed me what deception looks like up close. But more importantly, he showed me what freedom feels like once you finally let go. So, to anyone out there who feels trapped in a situation that no longer serves them, whether it's a toxic relationship, a one-sided friendship, or a job that drains the life out of you, remember this: walking away isn't weakness. It's courage. It's reclaiming your power. It's choosing yourself over the illusion of stability. Don't let fear of the unknown keep you tied to something that no longer brings you joy. The hardest part is making the decision. But once you do, you'll realize that the life waiting for you on the other side is filled with more possibilities than you ever imagined. I walked away from what I thought was love, and in doing so, I found something even greater: myself. And that, I can promise you, is worth more than any fleeting illusion of happiness. Here's to knowing your worth. Here's to choosing yourself. And here's to never settling for anything less than you deserve.